Good morning, everybody. How are we all? My name is Ali Board, and I am broadcasting this morning to you live from Down End Farm Studio. Thank you very much if you are joining me live, and thank you very much if you're watching me on catch up too. We usually have two audiences. Just in case you've not encountered what I'm doing before, this is called Technique Tuesday. Technique Tuesday I've been running for well over a year now. And the whole point of Technique Tuesday is to share my kind of thoughts on materials or a project that I'm working on, or maybe to answer a question that you have. Now, what tends to happen in the live broadcast is that I've got a little screen to my left where people are leaving me comments. So I will refer to that during the broadcast. Just in case you're watching it on catch up, that might come across as a little bit odd, especially if you're watching this on YouTube. But if you want to read the comments that people are making, pop back over to the Facebook page, and under the videos tab, you will find all of the comments that went along with this broadcast. So let me just check to see who's saying hello to me this morning. Right, who have we got? Good morning, Leanne. Good morning, Ali D. Morning, Mum. Who else have we got? Pat, good morning. Vera, Pauline. Oh, we've got the coffee on standby, marvellous. Jane, good morning. Ali WT, good morning. Lynn, Sharon. Gosh, lots of people in the room this morning. Thank you very much for tuning in. Now, what are we going to talk about today? One of my favourite subjects. It has to be said, as you can probably see in the studio, I am surrounded by my favourite colour, which is violet or purple. We will talk more about the language that goes with that. And I thought what I would do this morning is to share with you some of my favourite violet watercolours and my favourite purple watercolours, because it's difficult, isn't it? Sometimes when you're trying to pick a colour, you think, oh, do you know what? I fancy a new colour in my palette. Which one should I go for? Well, what I'm hoping to do with you this morning is not only share some of the colours that I like to use, but also to share with you a way that I like to organise my colours so that I have the best information. Now, in terms of violet and purple, what's the difference between the two? And everybody has an opinion on this. Doing my research again for TT last night, I realised for all the information that you can find saying that it's pro one thing, you'll get an equal amount of information saying the absolute opposite. So all I'm going to share with you this morning is my take on the subject. That isn't necessarily the technical take, that isn't necessarily the correct take on this subject. It's just the way that I interpret it. So for me, the difference between violet and purple is the difference between whether we're talking about mixing light, in which case we're talking about violet. So if you think of your spectrum colours, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo and violet, because obviously you have ultraviolet light, so we are talking about light. Whereas purple for me does obviously occur in the spectrum because it is a mixture of red and blue wavelengths. But purple for me is much more a colour that you would mix with pigments. Now again, that's not necessarily the correct view on that subject, but that's just the way that I differentiate between it. Add into that information the fact that purple, the actual use of the word purple, is actually more associated with ancient dyes. So if you think about probably one of the oldest pigments, which is Tyrian purple, and that is a much more reddy kind of colour. So the kind of papal robes, it's associated with royalty, it's associated with kind of hierarchy, and that's a colour that I would say is much more like a kind of borderline maroon colour. But you'll have your own view on it, I'm sure. And if you do have your own view on it, do pop it into the comments. And I'm just going to go back through and see what else people are saying. Oh gosh, lots and lots of comments this morning. Lots of people wishing me good morning. Good morning if you have done that. Lots of people. I gather that we have people that have got up in the middle of their night to say hello. It's 10 o'clock here in the middle of Dorset, but I gather that we do have some beautiful overseas viewers this morning. So good morning to you, and thank you very much for getting up so early to tune in. people saying that they've disbanded grandchildren so that they can tune in. I feel terribly responsible. Mum sent me a hug. Thank you, Mum. Everyone's saying good morning to each other as well. Isn't this a lovely thing when people are not only saying good morning to me, but they're saying good morning to each other too? Do keep your comments coming in. What I tend to do is I go back through the comments afterwards. So if I haven't explained anything particularly well, or you've missed something, or it didn't kind of make sense, pop your question into the comment and I will go back through them all later. I will also archive this on my Facebook page, so you go back to the videos tab and you can watch it again. Or you can go over to my website, to the blog, to Ali's blog on my website, where I will write a little bit more about the subject and I'll pop the video on there too. And don't forget, the Ali's blog has got all the Technique Tuesdays on it, so you can scroll back through and hopefully those are resources that will help you. So what I am going to do is going to switch you to the overhead shot so you can see some of the things that I'm playing with this morning. So here's my overhead shot, and you can see that here is the start of my organisation of my colours. These are just a few of the ones that I have. So what I do is I take a piece of watercolour paper, and I have to say I do take the best quality watercolour paper, because if I'm recording my colours, I really want them to shine on the surface. So this is Saunders Waterford 300 gram, which I've cut into little squares. And this is the extra white Saunders Waterford, just so that those colours really sing on the surface. Good morning, Sarah Jane. Here you will also see that I've recorded a little bit of information. So obviously I've got the colour painted on, which you can see I've kind of done a strong version of the colour. I record the name of it, and I also record who's made it. So in this case, DS stands for Daniel Smith. And I record some other bits of information about it too. So that little T there tells me that it's a transparent colour. And up in this top right hand corner, I record the pigment number. Now the pigment number isn't going to necessarily be of any interest to you, but it is to me because I like to compare brands. One of the lovely things I get to do in my job is I get to use lots of different brands of watercolour paint. And so what I do is I make sure that I understand what the ingredients is, and in this case the pigment that is being used. And I record it at the top so that I can then do a comparison if we get a brand or several brands that are using the same pigment. So I'll just quickly flick you through some of these. So here we've got quinacridone gold. You can see there it's transparent. What else we got? Was another really interesting one. So cerulean, Daniel Smith, it's semi-transparent and it granulates, of course, so you get that lovely texture. And you've got the pigment up here. Now, if you want to be able to view these resources, I have now made them available digitally. And what does that mean? So I have started, it's going to be a long process, to scan these into my website. And what is my website? Here it comes. It's alisonseaboard-fineart.co.uk. And if you go to the menu and you go to the section which is called resources, you will see two resources that I've started working on. It's going to be a bit of a lifetime's work, so bear with me. It's not something that's going to happen quickly. But I have scanned these in to my computer, and I have started to make these swatches available online so that you can go to the website and see the colours as hopefully as close as they possibly can be to real life. And hopefully that will give you a bit of information about how you can choose your colours. So I thought I would add to that today. So over here are 4 that I have already done for you, because these are kind of mainstays of my palette. And let me take you through them all. Let's just get them organised so that I don't get in a muddle. So here, top right hand side, we have Cobalt Violet. Now, Cobalt Violet varies wildly brand to brand. You can see this one is very pink. I do quite like it because it's quite pink. This is a Daniel Smith one. It's semi-transparent. It granulates. There it is squeezed out into the pan. So you can see there's quite a difference between the way the colour looks when it's squeezed out and the way that it manifests itself on the paper. Now, over here, this is really interesting. So this is Cobalt Violet Deep. This is another Daniel Smith colour, and now you can start to see that they are different pigment numbers. So this is pigment violet number 49 and this is number 14. Those are two colours that obviously I use an awful lot in my flower painting. Cobalt violet features very heavily because it is so pink. Cobalt violet deep features an awful lot in a lot of my work, simply because it's a lovely cure-all for backgrounds and for shadows and all sorts of things. Here are two that are potentially a little bit more unusual, and I just want to take you through some of the descriptors too. So this one up here is quinacridone violet. Now quinacridone violet is a very modern colour. So it was actually discovered in 1896, Quin Violet was, but it wasn't marketed until the 1950s. Now look at it in comparison. So this is called a violet, and this is also called a violet. So you have two very opposing ends of that scale. And down here, obviously, you've got one which we would say as artists has a blue bias. And this one up here has a red bias, and therefore this one is going to be really useful. In fact, I use it in my book for a painting of some hellebores because it's very close to the colour, whereas this one is much bluier and colder, and therefore you can use it for your shadows. So, but look at the way that they're described. They're both described as violet. So it kind of is down to semantics. It's much more a case of choosing colours that you think apply to your project rather than worrying about what they're called. This is something that I would call a purple. This is something that I would call a violet. But manufacturers, because of the pigment numbers, are choosing to describe it otherwise. Just as a tiny little bit of information, cobalt violet, this kind of bank of colours that I've got here, is probably the first modern synthetic violet, and is a colour that you will see heavily, comes up very heavily in French Impressionist paintings. If you think back to those beautiful Monet paintings that were based around these really subtle kind of violets. So that gives you a little bit of an overview. Down here in the bottom left, you have what is usually the star of the show, and this is Moonglow. This is a colour that is particular to Daniel Smith, and this is the one that really shouldn't work. So I try to avoid, wherever possible, watercolours that have more than one pigment in them, and I'll talk about that in a different Technique Tuesday. I'm not going to go into that now, but I don't like putting too many colours into my mix. Whereas Moonglow, you can probably see from my descriptor, has 3 different pigments in it, none of which are violet. So the top one is a green, the middle one is a blue, and the bottom one is a red. And they go together to combine this really rich, deep purple. And you will notice that on previous demonstrations that I have done, or anything that I did for artist demo days or any of that kind of stuff, you will see that Moonglow features really heavily. So I can see that there are some questions coming in, which I will try to answer as much as I can. Pauline says, love your way of keeping colours all mine on one large piece of paper. This is so much easier to use. Oh, thank you for that. Yes, I do find that actually flicking through it does make it a little bit easier to see. And you can kind of, it's a bit like a colour, you know, a Dulux colour chart, isn't it? You can see it much more clearly. Down here, Karen says, my Christmas list is getting longer. Sue says, thank you, Ali. It's so generous of you. I have a question, though. Do we actually need all these colours? Are they easy to replicate from a base set of colours? Sue, that's a really, really interesting question, and one that has multiple answers. There are some colours that you can replicate. My overriding bit of advice, though, is that if you're trying to replicate them and you're using too many pigments to get there, the chances are that they are going to make mud really quite quickly. So just be really mindful of the actual number of colours that are going together to make them up. Mick says, I've noticed that certain colours from one manufacturer may be listed as semi-transparent, but the same colour from another manufacturer is listed as transparent. Why the difference for the same colour? Again, Mick, brilliant question. So the answer is that in the same way that you would buy possibly one ingredient from a supermarket and then get variations in the way that that manifests itself, that also applies to watercolours, in that manufacturers may be using and importing the same pigment, but they are going to process it in different ways, and that tends to be the difference. Also, there isn't necessarily one overriding version of a pigment. There might be different versions of it. A couple of people are saying that the sound keeps going. We have got a thunderstorm here at the moment. What I will do is after this, yes, I am aware that it does keep stopping and starting. I apologise for that. But pop over to the blog afterwards, and where I will archive it and you can see it some more. Right, let's move on to some of the other colours that I think might be useful to you. So we'll bring this one in, and we will bring this one in, and we will bring this one in for the time being. So we've got 3 going on here for the moment. So on the left we have Purpurite Genuine, in the middle we have Lunar Violet, and on the right hand side we have Ultramarine Violet. Now these are all Daniel Smith colours, but that's just a coincidence. These 2 are probably only going to be found in Daniel Smith. This one, Ultramarine Violet, you will find in lots of different brands. So I am going to do a little swatch of each, and then hopefully you can see how these colours are going to manifest themselves. So Purpurite Genuine, why is there no pigment number in the top left hand corner? There's no pigment number in the top left hand corner because it's what's called a Primatech colour. And a Primatech colour means that it is the pure pigment as it is dug up out of the ground. So there is no kind of manufacturing process. So I can't record a pigment number because there isn't one. It is just literally Purpurite. It's the same for amethyst and all sorts of other colours that Daniel Smith produce. So let's coat my brush in that colour, and we'll just take off the excess onto the kitchen roll. Let's just turn this to one side because it's easier to paint in. Now this is Purpurite, obviously a derivation of the word purple. So we'll get that in, and you can see that it is that kind of reddy, much more red biased version of a colour. I'm going to lay all my brush down to try and get this painted in. And we'll spread it out so that you can see it very, very clearly. So there's that Purpurite. Quite an earthy version of the purple, I would say, but useful nonetheless, certainly for shadows on your flower painting. Let's go for Lunar Violet now. This is an interesting one because this is a mixture of 2 pigments. This is a violet pigment, and it is a black pigment as well. It's the Mars black pigment. So it means that it's very deep and dark. And in fact, obviously, the minute that I put it down, does look really quite black and quite strong. But let's pull out that colour a little bit, and hopefully you'll start to see that it does have a little bit of a violet bias. And again, really interesting for shadow colours, for something with a bit of drama, for portraiture, all those sorts of things, and a really highly granulating colour too. So Pauline is saying, Ali, why are some colours marked as very permanent and others are marked as not even using the same, and others are marked as not even using the same pigment? Again, Pauline, that comes down to the manufacture and the processing of that pigment, because there are lots of other things that go into the makeup of watercolour. Then it depends on the quality of them, and depends on what other ingredients there are in there. If you are having problems with the internet, I do apologise. Do stick with me. I am going to archive this video later so that you can see the full version. Here is the Ultramarine Violet. Very different, isn't it? Very bright, very fresh, a lovely colour for your bluebells if you like painting your bluebell woods. Let's pull that colour down a little bit, and get it so that you've got a slightly thinner version. And there's your ultramarine violet. So that is a transparent colour and granulates too. So I'm hoping that you can see that is a really useful way of recording your colours, and also you can see that you've got lots of variations in choice when you are choosing your violets. So let's just go back to face on camera. There are gremlins in the works today. My apologies if those gremlins have affected your viewing. I will put a link. I will upload the recorded version of this, which tends to be a lot more stable. Obviously, I am in the middle of the countryside in the south of England and terribly reliant on the internet. We've got a hell of a rainstorm going on outside today, so I do apologise if you have missed that, but I promise that I will post lots of links later. If you have any further comments or if you have any further questions about those purples and violets, then do let me know. I always love to hear from you. We've got lots of things going on the website at the moment. The All Aboard Artists starts in earnest tonight. And I've got lots of things. If you pop over to the calendar of events, you will see that I've got lots of demonstrations coming up, both free to join, and we've got paid workshops that are happening virtually. Fingers crossed that come September, I can start to be doing things in person. Thanks ever so much for your support. If there's anything you want to see on Technique Tuesday, then do let me know. Hopefully we will catch up very soon. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves, and I will see you next week for another Technique Tuesday. Take care. Bye.